So over the last year, I've been taking a lot of photos of buildings, and in this video, I just wanted to share some tips that have helped me with taking those pictures. So let's just get straight to the tips. So the first thing I do when I shoot a building is to get the wide shot out of the way. If you do a really nice photo, it's great. But the thing that I reckon is, well, it's more fun to shoot, is trying to pick out details. And so one of the first things I remind myself is to, first of all, slow down and take your time. That building's not going anywhere. The cool thing about building photography, especially if you walk around the city or something like that, is there's heaps of buildings everywhere that you almost get overwhelmed. So your camera has so many possible subjects, and even within a building itself, there's so many vantage points and there's so many angles and sides of a building to consider. So you've got a lot of things to get through. So the key thing to do is slow down on each building and sort of just take a step back and just look for quirky things about it. I think if you sort of stake out your building by either walking around, seeing it from all sides, where the light's hitting the building, also taking note of what captures your mind, whether it's a pattern, whether it's an architectural feature, whether it's an angle. That's what I love about buildings. There's so many different elements, and each building does have a unique feature generally. If there is a just complete boring building, then move on. Buildings aren't going anywhere. And this sort of rolls into point number 2, is that often the first time you shoot a building, it might not be the best shot. It might not get the angle, the lighting might not be right. Buildings, especially in town, have this thing where the light from other buildings impacts them, the shadows get thrown onto them. Sometimes this glare is so strong from the sun that it just reflects everything. So there's all sorts of reasons why the particular time you go out to shoot a building might not be the best time. So because it's not going anywhere, constantly be on the lookout. I've actually started jotting just down notes on my phone of quirky buildings around town and the time of day and the thing that captured my mind. So sometimes it's, oh, here's a church with light and it was 4 o'clock on this road. And the time is important because you will notice that sometimes, like, especially if the sun's just setting on the complete wrong side of the facade, doesn't matter really what you're going to do with the photo, it's not going to be as good as when it's just lit really well. That's what I love about this, is over the last year I've gone back to Queen Street, which is the main city in Auckland, and just shot the same buildings over and over again and slowly just started to notice the patterns. So the next thing is, after you've sort of sat and figured out what features you want to shoot and what grabs your mind, I think this is the thing that I would recommend, is bringing a zoom lens. And I actually bought this lens, even though this is the 70 to 200 millimeter, it's the new one, IS3. And even though it's fantastic for portraits, this lens is just in every video at the moment, but even though it's fantastic for portraits, for wildlife, for sports, I actually bought it for building photography. Because often I've noticed that I was standing, especially in India, and I'd be like quite far away from a building typically, and there wasn't really an opportunity to go and get there, whether that was didn't have enough time or didn't know how to get higher up. And I constantly found myself on the kit lens maxing out the range of the zoom to try and pick out a detail. And I think depending on the type of photography you like, for me, I really like the details and sort of the abstract component of a building, and the zoom lens is where it really shines. Just because you can pick out a certain detail or a certain pattern and you can really focus the subject right onto that pattern. Sometimes with these big wide angle, or sort of the lens I'm shooting on now, like a 10 to 18 millimeter, where it does capture the whole building, it does tend to distract the viewer from what you want to see, whether that's just because there's a sign or a street post or a person or some huge amount of sky. But with a zoom lens, you can really hone in on that thing that caught your mind, and it allows you to shoot a building that can be, 100 meters away and still isolate the frame down to what it is you want. I noticed as well on the India trip when I was coming back, I was often taking quite a wide shot and then cropping down to a really cool detail. One of the best examples of this is probably this building in India where here's the first photo, and I ended up, which you can see is quite wide, but that building caught my mind. And then here's the second photo that I ended up cropping right down just to the part that when I was looking at it initially, that's what caught my eye. When you're zooming in, you're much closer. Those patterns, you can create way cooler effects. This brings me to my next point, which is angles and sort of the creativity component. Or the cool part of a building is that there's so many angles you can look at a building from. You know, you can have, like if this Lego brick set was a building, you can obviously have the front on, you can have the side on, you can have the other side, you can have the back. But when you're standing down here, you're looking up, you've got that view. You could also be in a higher building looking down, you've got that view. You've sort of got, if you stand on this angle looking that way, you've got this diagonal angle. Obviously, if all the windows are drawn straight now, they're getting this really cool diagonal effect. You can do, if there's another building here, you can start to merge them together. You can come close on the side, shoot that way. You can come far from an angle. So, especially with reflections and things like that, the building's fixed, it's not going anywhere. So it's up to you to move around. And I think experiment with different ranges. Sometimes I'll shoot standing right under the building, looking straight up like that, having that really imposing shot. Other times I'll go one street back, try and get it from across the road. Then I might go 2 streets back. Then I might see how far you can keep going back. And every time it does lend itself to different shot. And the more that you do this, the more that you just really think about this building and case it out, and the more opportunities you look at. Sometimes it's, if you walk down an alleyway, then you can look over that fence and then you can see the building. Other times you might have to go up a car park. Car parks are great because they just lend themselves to views that are different from just the street, from just constantly looking up and shooting like that. So the next point would be patterns. And most buildings generally have their own distinct patterns, which are a function of the building themselves, whether that's the distance between windows, or there might be a certain material that's on the exterior of the building. That's got a pattern. The cool thing about building photography is you as a photographer can apply your own pattern to that pattern, again by moving angles. And that's one of the things that I like the best, is whether that might be offsetting your camera so that this pattern comes on one side and then there's a space and then the pattern comes on another, so you're breaking up the uniform component of it. I'll show you some photos of what I'm talking about. Or whether you get a natural bend which causes a wave action, which is a function of the building, but only if you look at it at one angle. Here's a photo that I quite like, which shows the building sort of as a bit of an ocean as it's on the corner, taken on the corner. So applying your own patterns to the building or trying to unlock these patterns is quite a lot of fun. Okay, a couple more tips would be color. I think contrast of color is something to look out for. There's splashes of color everywhere in buildings, and the more you look for it, the more you notice. Combine this with the fact of light. So sometimes really bright light might accentuate a pattern. It might, depending on the angle of the light, it might put some part of the pattern in shade and the other in really bright focus. So the light of the building plus the light of the environment creates a whole huge component of different possibilities for you to shoot. There's a shot I took the other day of these red bars on a building, and I quite like this photo because for the most part that red is really hard to see, and it was only coming at a certain time when the light was bouncing from the building across the road that the red gets really highlighted. And if you look at that building in town, it's only like that for a certain amount of time in the day. Another photo is here, is looking for splashes of color, as you've got, I quite like this, you've got the contrast of the plain building on the left, sort of left-hand side of the building, and then on the right you've got these streaks of color rising up the building. Those little details, they make the photo interesting. I think looking for things like that, the secrets of the building, is really cool. And you'd be surprised, because often when you think of towers, you think that they're mainly just big concrete on iron structures with glass. But obviously glass has this ability to reflect light in a crazy way, especially around that sunset and sunrise hours. The biggest example I have, one of the best examples I have, is this disco shot that I took. Yeah, where the light just went really crazy. And then one of the last things I'd say is, it's obvious, but look for reflections, because that's just one more thing that a building can present. Often a reflection of something else can make the building really cool. This photo I just took just the other day, I really like, because again, it's only at a certain time of day with the light coming at a certain time that it will show the building like this. But it was basically like a big mirror for the sky tower behind. Yeah, hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully you enjoyed that, took something from it. Let me know if there's any other things in the comments that I missed that are tips that could help me with my shot. Yeah, so thanks for watching, guys. Keep shooting them buildings, and see you in the next video. I just love this lens. Like, if you're on the fence and you think, oh, I'm not sure about it, man, one satisfied customer. All right, see ya.